right, I need my ushers to come, and meanwhile they're bringing up the quiz, and go ahead, Ben, and click on that so the folks can get your app out, all right, or go to kahoot.it, and there's a number that's coming up on the screen in just a minute. They're handing out a paper. We're going to practice our map again, okay? This is not a quiz yet. It'll be at the end, but we'll get a little more practice here. And again, the purpose of this class is that we would better understand where some of these locations are. In fact, I was just reading through the chronological Bible in my devotions, and I'm in Nahum this morning, and there was a verse that talked about Bashan and Hermon and Tyre. I'm like, wow, that's exactly what we're talking about in Sunday school today. And so some of these places that otherwise, your brain just kind of goes numb. You're reading these Bible places, I don't know where any of this stuff is, and you don't even think about it. But if we can get some of the key locations in our mind, then as we're reading, it'll make more sense, okay? So, oh wow, we've got a lot of names up here. All right, Brother Ben, can you choose number 5 for the lighting or whatever that is, 6 or something? All right, here we go. This is actually an introduction to what we're going to be talking about today. So go ahead. Are you ready? The Jordan River has its origin at the, here are your choices, Sea of Galilee, Golan Heights, Dead Sea, Mount Hermon. All right, you got 10 more seconds to choose an answer. 3, 2, 1. We have 42 answers. It is Mount Hermon, and a lot of you got that right. Good. All right, next. Okay. Og, the king of Bashan, was known for what? Being a giant, being very fat, defeating the Israelites at Ai, or making a covenant with Israel. And again, if you're not doing the app, at least think about the questions and think about what answer you would choose if you had the app. And here we go, we have 30 answers. Time's up. Being very fat. Actually, that was Eglon. Ha! The egg-shaped king, Eglon. No, he was a giant. All right, we'll get to that. Here we go, next. Where was Jesus when he said, "Upon this rock will I build my church"? The question is there at the top. And we have Jerusalem, Capernaum, Caesarea Philippi, Mount of Olives. You have 4 choices. Think of an answer. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 43 answered the question. It is Caesarea Philippi. All right, so we're going to learn some things. That's my purpose here, is for you to see that you don't know everything. And you're going to learn some things. All right, next. Which enemy neighbor of Israel was descended from Esau, Jacob's brother? The Midianites, Edomites, Moabites, Canaanites. Okay, 5 seconds. Ooh, we got 43 answers. Going up, going up. 46 answers. And Edomites is correct. All right, a lot of you got that one. Good. Next. Which idol king did the Philistines worship? Pan, Dagon, Baal, or Ashtaroth? What was the main god of the Philistines? Still 10 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Okay, Dagon, good job. You know that Bible story of Dagon falling, right? And his head fell off and his arms fell off. Okay, just 2 more questions. Where did Jeroboam erect a golden calf and set up a worship altar? In Shechem, Hazor, Dan, or Samaria? Good Old Testament Bible history. This is after the split of the kingdom. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 45 answers. The correct answer is Dan. Okay. Good. We'll see some pictures of that. Which ancient city did Joshua burn when he conquered it? Megiddo, Tyre, Hazor, or Bashan? As soon as you answer on your app, you should find out whether you were right or wrong. But we got 5 more seconds here to think of an answer. Hazor. Ah, okay. It's a nice spread of answers there again. And I think this is the last question coming up. 8 of 8. Which river divides the land east of the Jordan River between Gilead and Moab? Arnon, Yarmuk, Zarid, or the Jabbok? Okay, I think you're guessing. That's fine. 3, 2, 1. It's Jabbok. All right. About a third of you got that one. Kristen, good job. And Elijah, nice. And then we have a team effort up here. The Gosses took 3rd place. Good job. Woo! Laser lights. Woo! All right, the next thing we're going to do is get your paper ready. And do you remember how to fold it? So we're going to fold. Everybody have one? Anybody need one? Okay, where's an usher? Okay, hands up if you need one. So fold it in half this way, fold it again. So you have, keep it nice and straight, crease it. All right, if everybody participates, you'll learn more, you'll have more fun. All right, then we'll fold it like a V, match the corners up, okay? And then one more time. Okay, so Ben, we're going to actually not use the overhead or the slides quite yet, but I'm going to pull this map over. All right, so then when you open it up, all right, so we have all these squares, right? So, right in the middle, we'll do this one again, so we'll kind of walk through this again. So right here in the middle, and right at this cross point right here is where we're going to put a little bump, all right? Ah, they're bringing it up on the screen. Can you zoom in just a little bit more? All right, then, right here, we're going to just kind of come straight down. I'm going to use the thicker marker. Straight down, bump, and then it kind of curves up a little bit there. Everybody with me? All right, now we're going to put a dot here, and this is A. You may remember what A stands for? Ashkelon, good. And now we're going to do a nice curve from here through the A and then kind of off the middle of this whole section here, all right? So nice smooth through the Ashkelon and off the map. All right, now right on this crosshairs right here is N, and N stands for Netanya, which means it was a modern city, and that's where a lot of the hotels are and things like that for the 30 people who have signed up to go on the Israel trip, amen? But Netanya is not, N for not, a Bible lands city, okay? We don't see the name Netanya anywhere in the Bible. Now, 1/3 of the way down, right here, is J for Joppa, good. And that's the modern city of Tel Aviv, which is where their main airport is and a lot of the government offices in Tel Aviv. Halfway up here is Caesarea Philippi. So we'll just abbreviate, I'll abbreviate it CP. I'll let you figure out how to spell it. Caesarea Philippi. And we looked at that last week. That was a major port city, especially in the time of Christ and Paul. That's where they had the aqueducts and amphitheater. All right, what is this mountain right here? Mount Carmel. Good. Now we're just kind of coming up the coast here. We're going to put a T right here. Actually, I'll spell it out. That's Tyre. And we are going to talk about that city in today's lesson. All right, now let's come over here, and right on this crosshairs is where we're going to draw the Sea of Galilee. It's kind of oval, but it kind of poofs in right here. We'll talk, actually that's going to be our focus next week, is the whole Sea of Galilee area right here. And then right here at the crosshairs is where we're going to put in the Dead Sea, and it actually kind of curves in, it goes off the map. We're just focusing on this part of the map. And obviously this is the Jordan River. It starts up higher here, so we'll continue up. It kind of branches off. Now I had just a triangle here before for Mount Hermon, but we're actually going to, it's a whole mountain range, and Mount Hermon has a high point on that range. We're going to come back and put some cities in here today. All right, what's the one right? Oh, I know which one we missed. Right here is a valley. What was the name of that valley? Jezreel, okay? And then kind of at this end is Mount Gilboa. We talked about that last week. That's where Saul and his sons died in battle. All right. If we were to fold the map in between these two lines so that this kind of poofs up right here, then that would be the ridge of a mountain range, okay? And this whole side over here is the mountain range, and this is a valley right in the middle where the Jordan River flows. So right on the ridge right here, we'll put S for Sychar or Samaria. So it's right on this crosshairs here and right between these lines on the ridge. And then right down here, right at the north end of the Dead Sea, we're going to put a star. That's a sad star. And of course that stands for Jerusalem. Okay. What is just south of Jerusalem, kind of like right on the line here? Bethlehem. All right, that's in a future lesson. If you want to go a little bit further down, we'll have the Bible city of Hebron. A lot of Old Testament history about Hebron. And then off to the side here would be Kadesh Barnea. We'll get to that later. Down here in the valley, north of the Dead Sea, is an important city, Jericho. If we want to put, we talked about Gaza last week. Remember that was an important city for Samson. That's where he met Delilah. So we have Gaza, Ashkelon, Joppa, Netanya, Caesarea Philippi, Mount Carmel, Tyre, Jezreel, coming down, Sychar, Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Hebron. Then we have Jericho here. Of course, you've labeled these bodies of water in Mount Hermon. We're going to come up here, and right here, let's label this. You know what? I call that Caesarea Philippi. I was wrong. That's just Caesarea Maritima. This is Caesarea Philippi. Oh, speaking of Philippi, that reminds me of bread. And somebody brought in a whole table, okay? The Carlsons brought in a whole table of bread that somebody donated from a bakery. And so if you feel like loafing this afternoon, grab a bag. There are bags there, and you can put some loaves in the bag. And all right, there's also a lot of VHS. We're getting rid of all the VHS tapes from the library, And if you want any free, there's some S.M. Davis messages that are great, but nobody borrows them from our library anymore. So some of you older folks who still have, VHS at home, help yourself. Take them home, enjoy them. Okay, that's the end of my commercial. Back to the lesson. All right, Caesarea Philippi. Right about here, I want you to label a dot and just call it Dan. We're going to be talking about that in today's lesson, Dan. North of the Sea of Galilee, kind of south of Dan, but along this ridge here, is the city of Hazor. Hazor. That's another city we're going to talk about in today's lesson. So we have Dan, Hazor, Caesarea Philippi, and Tyre. We're kind of focusing on this zone today. Next week, we're going to focus here on the Sea of Galilee area. And then this whole area right here is Bashan, B-A-S-H-A-N, Bashan. And that's where that King Og, the really tall guy, for about 13, his bed was at least 13 feet long and 6 feet wide. That's pretty big, okay? So we're going to cover these areas, I think. And if you wanted to put the scale on there, some of you missed this last week, from one line to the other is 40 miles. And then going this way between the lines is 15 miles. And we had mentioned last week that if we put Allentown right here in the middle and go one entire length and a little bit more, you'd be in Philadelphia. And if you start at Allentown and go one entire length and a little bit more, you'd be at Wilkes-Barre. So that kind of gives you an idea of the length of the country, all right, just for reference sake. All right, hold on to that map, and let me add some things to that. As they're bringing up the next slide, I want you to take your Bibles and go to Ezekiel 26 and 27. We'll get to that in just a minute. Now, there's a lot of cities on this map, and I don't care that you can't see them. I just want to point out the colored areas. This is the modern countries that surround Israel today. So Egypt, so here's Israel, the peach, okay? And this part right here, and here, these two areas are the Palestinian areas. This is called the West Bank, and this is the Gaza Strip. And then the rest of the peach is the modern country of Israel. Notice it goes all the way down here, okay? We don't have all that on our map that we're drawing. Egypt is this part here. And then if we come around this way, we have the modern country of Jordan, which borders on the Jordan River. And then we go north of that, and we have Syria. And then right here is Lebanon, just to the upper left where Tyre is, and above that would be Sidon. So that's the country of Lebanon. There's a mountain range there. And there's a lot of trees, very fertile area. A lot of cedar trees that, of course, Solomon used in his kingdom. So there's a lot of borders with other countries. This part right here technically is Israel right now, okay? It used to be Syrian until the 1967 Six-Day War, and the Israelites came in and took that area back from the Syrians. And we'll talk about that Golan Heights area as we go through the lesson. All right, next slide. So some of the enemies of Israel were in the surrounding areas. When they came into the kingdom, and even while they lived in this area of the Promised Land, they had enemies around them. So this down here below the Dead Sea is Edom, and Edom was founded by Esau. Next slide. Right here above Edom, to the side of the Dead Sea, is Moab, and above that is Ammon. Moab and Ammon were both sons of Lot. And maybe you remember that story when Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed, and Lot's two daughters committed incest with their father, and then these were their two sons. And then they each became fathers of nations. All right, so this is a different map here, but it kind of shows the same thing. We have the Moabites, the Ammonites down below here would be the Edomites. They have the Midianites on here. The Midianites were descendants of Abraham's son Midian. Did you know Abraham had a son Midian? He had Ishmael, and he had Isaac. My brain was wanting to say Jacob, but I knew that wasn't right. Okay, Isaac, thank you. But then after Sarah died, he had a wife, Keturah. Did you know that? And had a few sons by her. One of them was Midian, and a lot of them traveled far east, like over toward India and that area. But Midianites, and then this area is called Gilead. Notice up here is Phoenicia, and that's where Tyre is located, which we'll talk about in just a minute. And then this area, of course, is the Philistines up the coast here. And then the Canaanites kind of filled in this whole area in here. Now notice in this big map, we just kind of take a zoom out, all right? So you recognize Israel here. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but this upside down U shape is called the Fertile Crescent. Does it look like a crescent roll kind of? You know, remind you of bread again? And this was the bread baskets of the land. It was very fertile because there are two main rivers, the Euphrates River right here and the Tigris River. So down here we have Babylon, Ur the Chaldees. Does that ring a bell? Where Abraham came from. Nineveh. Up here is Mount Ararat, so that's where the ark landed. So you think of it, after the ark landed and Noah and his family left, and they started having children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and multiplied, and probably settled somewhere in this area. And then we had the Tower of Babel. And there were so many people, and God brought destruction on them by changing their languages, and then they began to separate and spread out in all parts of the world. So by the time Abraham is leaving Ur the Chaldees, there really are a lot of people living in this whole area. And of course, down here is Egypt. All right, let's zero in on this northern territory. So on our map, we saw that dot. We mentioned last week, just briefly, that this is where the king Hiram sent trees from the forests there and sent them down. And we looked at some verses where Solomon requested that. And people in Jesus' day actually came down from this area. They heard about Jesus ministering in Galilee, and they traveled from here down. And we even see that at the in the Beatitudes message, right before that, it says that people traveled from this area. Now, this is not actually the city of Tyre, but it is a Syrian city. Tyre was described, and I have you turn here to Exodus 27, as a major, major city of commerce. A lot of trade going on here. And we see in verse 3, say unto Tyrus, O thou that art situate at the entry of the sea, which art a merchant of the people for many isles. Thus saith the Lord God, O Tyrus, thou hast said, I am of perfect beauty. Thy borders are in the midst of the sea. Thy builders have perfected that beauty. Chapter 27 of Ezekiel in verse 5, they have made all thy shipboards of fir trees of Shinar. That's actually another name for Mount Hermon. They have taken cedars from Lebanon to make masts for thee. Of the oaks of Bashan, so you know, there's another name we know. The oaks of Bashan have they made thine oars. The company of the Asherites have made benches of ivory, which they brought out of the isles of Chittim, fine linen from Egypt, and it just goes on and on and on. And starts naming country after country after country. Down in verse 17, it mentions Judah and the land of Israel. They were thy merchants. They traded in the marketplace. And mentions Damascus in Syria, verse 18, 19, Dan and Javan, going on and on and on. I don't have time to read the whole chapter. But the point is, it was a major city, but they're also very proud. So go back now to chapter 26, and we'll see that there was a prophecy made against this nation. And in verse 2, Son of man, because Tyrus hath said against Jerusalem, aha, she is broken that was the gates of the people. She is turned unto me. I shall be replenished. Now she is laid waste. Therefore, saith God, behold, I am against thee, O Tyrus, and will cause many nations to come against thee, as the sea causeth his waves to come up. And they shall destroy the walls of Tyrus and break down her towers. I will also scrape her dust from her and make her like the top of a rock. Now, that's a very, very, very specific prophecy. And what we find out is less than 20 years after that prophecy was made, in 586 BC, Nebuchadnezzar actually came in and destroyed the city. Now, it was a port city on the land. And after he left, then the people who were left said, this is total destruction. And they took boats and they went across to an island. And you see on the picture here this island. And they made an island nation. Well, then about 250 years later, Alexander the Great came and he wanted to conquer that city. So he literally had horses and ropes, and they pulled all the debris from the old city into the water and made a bridge. And then they marched across that bridge and into the city and conquered that island nation of Tyre and completely destroyed it again. And then later, another king came through, and today, that area where these two great countries, great nation cities were, is really just rocks, and fishermen are spreading nets, exactly like it says there. Now, in the New Testament, it does talk about a city of Tyre, and Jesus went to Tyre, and people from Tyre and Sidon came down, but they actually are located near those cities, and none of the inhabitants of those first cities started the other ones. It was like a totally different group of people that came in, not related, just happened to share the name, okay? Oops. We know that Jesus, now this is an actual photograph, okay? Somebody's iPhone back in that day of Jesus traveling. He took his disciples up to Tyre and Sidon. Now this is Syrian Gentile territory, and was preaching the gospel to them up there and healing people. You heard about the Syrophoenician woman. In fact, we'll probably get to that in a lesson coming up pretty soon in Pastor Sunday School series in Mark 7. All right, Mount Hermon. This was a very important landmark in Israel. It marked the northern border of Israel, and probably this river, I'm guessing, is part of the border as well. One of the tallest mountains in Israel is located as part of this ridge. It's snow-capped, as we mentioned. Here's some pictures of it. Kind of hard to see, but in the background there is snow-capped mountains. And this is the headwaters of the Jordan River, because as that snow melts and it comes down into a river nearby and it flows down and then feeds into the Sea of Galilee, and from there all the way down to the Dead Sea. I want to insert just a quick lesson here about the idolatry of the Canaanites. How many of you have heard of high places? Been reading through your Bible, reading through the Old Testament, you hear them talk about the high places. Kings of Israel, would set up high places. Well, high places, I just thought were, before I studied this out, I thought they were altars or buildings that they made that were high off the ground. No. They actually would go to high mountains and create these altars to their god Baal. So Mount Hermon was actually a very important worship site. They have uncovered already 20 different temples and worship places on Mount Hermon that were, and a lot of idols like this one, which represent the god of Baal. So Baal was a bull, and even the children of Israel, when they came out of Egypt, already were thinking about trying to picture God as a bull. All right, so this religion must go way back and cover all over the world. When they came out, and you remember Balaam and Balaam's donkey. Remember, the donkey started talking, and then Balaam said, nay. And Balaam tried to defeat the children of Israel by getting them to worship Baal and to engage in the immorality, which is an integral part of their worship. So I'm not going to go through that whole story. Jezebel, her daddy's name was Ethbaal. That kind of gives you a clue who he worshiped. And he was the king in Sidon, okay, the Zidonians, which is up there near Tyre and Sidon. And so Jezebel had 400 prophets of Baal that she brought down into Israel. And closely associated with Baal was the worship of Ashtaroth. That name should ring a bell. Several different names also spelled, you see that up there. Remember Solomon, even the wisest man, 300 wives and 700 concubines, and a lot of them worshiped these false gods. And that later in his life drew his heart away, and he worshiped the gods of the Zidonians. All forms of immorality, including homosexuality, drunkenness. There's even evidence that they involved in in drugs. We would call them illegal drugs, but had mind-altering drugs that were part of their worship. The Hebrew word translated groves is Asherah, which refers to the goddess Astorah, the female consort of Baal. And often on these mountains, they would have these, to us, we would call it like a beautiful garden. But it was part of their worship that they would go there and worship these gods. Then another god was Dagon. He appeared in various forms. He was a storm god, a god of harvest. Do you see on his back, it looks like a fish? Okay? And he's kind of like poking his head out of the fish, and he has feet down here. He's often part of the Philistine worship. Human sacrifices were a part of a lot of the worship of all of these gods, and they would take their firstborn child and put it into these ovens in the arms of these gods. And if the wife, were to start crying or showing any emotion, then that worship would have no effect. And so then they would have to worship, take the next child that comes along and offer that one and keep her from crying so that it would appease the gods. I mean, horrible. And they used to say that the critics said, that never really happened. But they have actually found over 20,000 urns in a Carthage cemetery that had the cremated remains of some of these little children. You say, well, that would never, that's so ancient. That never happens today. What about abortion? I think we've probably killed more babies in the worship of gods here in America, gods of immorality, right? And killed a lot of babies in that process. So we are not guiltless. Here is an altar that was discovered in Megiddo. We talked about that city last week. And do you see the stairs on the left? Kind of going up to the altar, and they have found a lot of animal remains there. I don't know if they found human remains. Leviticus 18, this is the point of covering this, is God allowed their idolatry and immorality to flourish to the point that God finally said, I've had enough. My wrath is full, and I need to take those people completely out of the land and put the Israelites, the children of Israel, in that land. And it was because they had defiled themselves and he said, the land is defiled. Therefore I do visit the iniquity upon it, and the land itself vomiteth out her. Wow, that's pretty graphic, isn't it? So God's saying the land is defiled by these wicked people, and it's going to get rid of them by you Israelites coming in. And he warns them, do not get involved in their worship, or you also are going to be taken out. And of course, we know the end of that story, that they were. And I think the same warning goes for us today, that our country is headed down a similar path. That's right. Let's turn to Deuteronomy, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, chapter 3. On the map, we labeled this area of Bashan. Chapter 3 and verse 1, then we turned, and this is Moses rehearsing their history to the children of Israel. Oh, look above that in verse 37. Only the land of the children of Ammon thou camest not, nor any place of the river Jabbok. Yeah, we just talked about that, at least in our lesson. I guess we didn't label that, did we? All right, we'll do that later. All right, because there's 3 rivers that kind of feed in, and Jabbok is one of them. Then we turned and went up the way to Bashan, and Og, the king of Bashan, came out against us, he and his people, to the battle at Edrei. And the Lord said unto me, fear him not, for I will deliver him and his people and the land into thy hand, and thou shalt do unto him as thou didst to Sihon, king of the Amorites, which dwelt in Heshbon. So the Lord our God delivered into our hands Og also, the king of Bashan, and all his people, left none to remain. We took all of his cities. There was not a city that was not taken. 60 cities. And they were all the region of Argob, the kingdom of Og. The cities were fenced with high walls, gates, and bars. And then besides, there were unwalled towns, a great many. So there were 60 walled cities in that area of Bashan, and a lot of unwalled cities. And the children of Israel conquered that whole area, okay, because all those enemies came out to fight against them, and they killed all the men and went in and took over the cities, utterly destroyed them. But jump all the way down to verse 11. For only Og, king of Bashan, remained of the remnant of the giants. Behold, his bedstead was a bedstead of iron. Is it not in Rabbah of the children of Ammon? There must have been a museum there. So they had his bed in the museum. 9 cubits, okay, that's like 13 feet was the length thereof, and 4 cubits, that's like 6 feet the breadth of it after the cubit of a man. So pretty interesting there. Today, that area is called the Golan Heights. So that's mountain ridge, and it kind of is along the side of the Sea of Galilee and the upper Jordan River. And as I mentioned before, after the Six-Day War, the Jews took that area over, which is actually a very good thing, because underground and a lot of rain that's on that area flows down, and they actually have cisterns and pipes and pumps, and they harvest that water coming off the mountain and pipe it down to southern Israel, okay? And if the Syrians were ever to take that area, the Golan Heights, back again, Israel would lose a huge source of their fresh water that they need for all their cities and for living. So that's very important that they hold on to the Golan Heights. Today it's very lush. In 1967 and 48, when Israel became a nation, that area was barren and just dry, and there was nothing there. But the children of Israel, the Jews who've come back, have turned it into a promised land, just as the Bible prophesied, by the way. All right, let's take our Bibles now and go to Mark 16. Mark 16. Excuse me, I can't read my own writing. Matthew 16, sorry. And look at verse 13. Again, this is one of those cities that in reading the Bible, you just think, oh, that must be one of those little villages somewhere around the Sea of Galilee or around Jerusalem, you know? And if you didn't know better and didn't know a little bit about this city, it wouldn't mean very much. But actually, Caesarea Philippi, and you see the arrow pointing to that up here on the map, it's in the foothills of Mount Hermon. It's really quite a ways north of the Sea of Galilee. Sea of Galilee is way down here, okay? This is a small lake kind of in the path of the sea. So we're way up here in the mountains, Caesarea Philippi. It was actually an important Greek-Roman city. Someone has described it as the Las Vegas of their day. A lot of immorality, a lot of God worship over there, not of Jehovah. They worshiped a god called Pan, okay? Ever heard of that? Picture that, the Greek god, half goat, half man, all right? Here's some temples to the false gods. Pan was one of them. And carved right into the mountain are these places where they would have had statues of idols. It's kind of hard to see this, but if you look online at some of these pictures, it's pretty fascinating. This is an artist's rendition of what that may have looked like. So carved right into the rock walls were where they would have idols, but there were also temples there and all kinds of things going on. So it was a very busy place. In the back of this pit, which was part of their temple, was a deep, deep pit called the Gates of Hades. Okay? Now look here at Matthew chapter 16, verse 13. When Jesus came into the coast of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Whom do men say that I, the Son of Man, am?" And they said, "Some say thou art John the Baptist, some Elias, some Jeremiah, or one of the prophets." And he said, "But whom say ye that I am?" And Simon Peter answered, "Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God." Wow, that was a pretty important recognition. So Jesus was announcing, yes, you're right, I am the Messiah. They're not in a Jewish area. They're up here in the middle of this pagan city, okay? It'd be like going to Las Vegas or New York City for Christ to announce who he is. Not in, the Bible Belt. And then we jump down to verse 18, and Jesus said, "I say unto thee, thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell, the gates of Hades, shall not prevail against it. He's standing right there, possibly right near that, as he's telling his disciples. The pagan worship, the demonic worship all around us cannot be more powerful than I am. And you go on in the passage, and he healed. He healed a young man who his disciples couldn't heal, who had a demon, and cast that demon out. So here's another picture of that same area. This is also where many believe the Mount of Transfiguration actually was located. Because if you look at chapter 17, the very next chapter, it does not say they moved anywhere except that he went up into the high mountain. Well, this is in the foot of Mount Hermon, so he's right there. So he went further up on the mountain where all these temples to Baal and other gods are, and this is where he was transfigured before his disciples. And then we come all the way back to chapter 17, verse 22, and talks about them going back to Galilee. All right? So this is very possibly where the transfiguration took place. Now let's talk about another important Old Testament city, the city of Dan. And for the sake of time, I'm not going to have you turn there. I'll read these verses to you. A large number of families from the Israelite tribe of Dan relocated during the 12th century from the central region of Israel all the way north to this Canaanite city called Laish Leshem in the foothills of Mount Hermon. And interesting, there's evidence that this city of Dan had been there for thousands of years. It's very possible that even Abraham, when he came out of Ur of the Chaldees and was coming up and then down into the Canaan land, very possibly stopped. And this was right along a major travel route. So he very possibly stopped and went into the city. So this was uncovered just in the last few decades. And there's a series of arched entrances that take you deep into the city, and they're still in the process of excavating that. But here in Judges 18, verses 1 and 2, it says, "In those days the tribe of the Danites sought them an inheritance to dwell in. For unto that day their inheritance had not fallen unto them among the tribes of Israel. And the children of Dan sent of their family 5 men from the coast, men of valor, to spy out the land, search it. And they said, Go search the land. So then they went up in Judges 8:27, came to Laish unto a people that were quiet and secure, and smote them with the edge of the sword, and burnt the city with fire." And then it says they renamed that city from Laish to Dan. So today it's known as Dan, and we labeled it on our map as being Dan. And there also was, you remember back in the book of Judges? The book of Judges is kind of a strange book, but there was a prophet named Micah who had a lot of false gods, and he had an ephod. And the children of Dan took him up there to the city of Dan, and he became their priest. And we see that also in Judges 8 and verse 30. They took the things which Micah had made, and the children of Dan set up the graven image. Another thing, though, that happened in the city of Dan is that that's where Jeroboam, remember when the kingdom of Israel was split? Solomon's son Rehoboam became the king just of Judah, and then the 10 northern tribes were governed by Jeroboam, and Jeroboam said, I don't want my people going into Jerusalem to worship, and so he set up a high place up there in the city of Dan. And they actually, in recent archaeology, have uncovered it. Now, they added the metal on there to show what it looked like, but these rocks and the well, a lot of that was original, maybe a little bit reconstructed, but that's where he set up idolatry. We're going to look at the city of Hazor. Remember on the map, we labeled that. It's just a little bit, it's north of Galilee, but south of the city of Dan. And this was a prime location on the main travel route coming up the coast and then heading off to Damascus. And then from there down through, to Babylon and Assyria and places like that. So it was the connection route from Egypt all the way in the south, all the way across. So Hazor was on a hill. It had walls around it, and it's mentioned often in the Bible. In fact, let's look at one of these passages. Go to Joshua. Joshua 11. And in verse 1 it says, "And it came to pass when Jabin, king of Hazor, had heard these things, that he sent to Jobab," and he names a whole bunch of other kings, "and they came out to fight." But look at verse 10. "And Joshua at that time turned back and took Hazor and smote the king thereof with the sword, for Hazor beforetime was the head of all those kingdoms." So there were all these individual kingdoms in that area with their own kings, but it's like Hazor and Jabin was the head of all those kings. That was a pretty important city. Notice in verse 11, it says he smote all the souls that were therein with the edge of the sword, utterly destroying them. There was not any left to breathe. And he burnt Hazor with fire. And it goes on to say he didn't burn any of the other cities, but he did utterly destroy and burn Hazor. And for what I've been reading in just recent years, as they've been digging deeper, they have found an entire layer of the city that is charcoal. It's like completely evidence it was completely burned, just like the Bible said. And they've not seen that with other cities in that area, which confirms, again, we don't need that to confirm because we know this is what the Bible said. The city must have been rebuilt at some point and not by the Jews, because we find out, go to Judges, just a few pages over, Judges 4. So this is after Joshua has already died and the leaders of Israel have died, and now we're in the time of the Judges. And in chapter 4, it talks about Ehud. He was, after Ehud was dead, the Lord sold him into the hand of Jabin, king of Canaan, that reigned in Hazor. So evidently that city was rebuilt and again used, because it was in a prime location. And then the rest of that story, which I'm not going to read to you, is that story about Sisera and Jabin. Deborah, and how they went to battle against Jabin, and you can finish reading the rest of that story. It's pretty interesting. Okay, the city was also rebuilt by Solomon, and he used it as a store city and as a had some of his soldiers up there and chariots and everything, because again it was a key location to protect the nation below. And then we find out in 2 Kings at the end of the northern kingdom that the king Tiglath-Pileser of Assyria came in, and it specifically mentions Hazor along with several other northern cities that he conquered. Another interesting thing that has been uncovered there recently is this is what a well looks like in Jewish land, in Israel, okay? We picture a well, of course today when you do a well, it's a pipe, that goes in the ground and there's a pump on the top. And we picture, Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water, or Jack, So we picture this round well and a bucket that goes down in. That's not how it was in Israel times. They had to dig this huge, they would cut into the rock and dig this huge cistern, and then they would try to direct stream water into it and rainwater, and if there were any springs nearby, try to get the springs to feed into that. So it was like a man-made lake, or a pool. And then there were stairs, and people would actually walk down the stairs to get to the water and fill their cisterns and then walk back up. So these were huge. And this is in the city of Hazor. This is another cistern that I saw 5 years ago when I was there in Israel. This is some of the folks from our group and our guide in the blue shirt. But look how huge that is. And they would try to get as much water into that as possible. And it was tight, it was into the rock. And so by going in there, they could then fill up their cisterns, their jars and things, and carry it out. I'm going to take just a minute here to talk about the Druze people, and then we're going to do one more quiz before we go. The Druze people today live in that Mount Hermon area and also in the Lebanon area. Brother Noah George, the missionary that we support in Lebanon, he actually has a lot of inroads with the Druze people. They do not have a country of their own, but they are a distinct people group, mainly tightly knit because of what they believe. And it's kind of a strange, it's a blend of Judaism, Islam. Just get your head around that, blending Islam and Judaism, but also blending Christianity, Gnosticism, Hinduism, okay? They believe in reincarnation, but they also put a high emphasis on truthfulness. and they try very hard to get along with everybody in their area, even though they're right in the middle of a hot spot with Syria and Lebanon and Israel and all this war going on, and Muslims and Jews. They try to be neutral and get along with everybody. They have a strong reverence for Moses' father-in-law, Jethro, and some actually believe that they are descendants, perhaps, of Jethro. But there's 1 million of these Druze people, and scattered in villages, a lot up there in that area of Mount Hermon. Okay, so just looking at your map, I don't think we're going to have time to redraw it together as a group, but you can practice drawing it. So down here we had Ashkelon, that was right on the line. Joppa, Netanya, Caesarea, Mount Carmel, Gilboa, Samaria, so that was what we covered before, Jericho. And then up here at the top there's Dan, Caesarea Philippi, Hazor, and Tyre, right there. Over here on the side, the Golan Heights. Today it was called Bashan. All right, so now that we have kind of looked at those spots and reviewed, I want to point out, if you look at a map, right here there's a river coming in, right here at the middle there's a river, and way down here there's a river. And the Bible talks about these three rivers quite a bit. So down here at the bottom is Arnon, A-R-N-O-N. If you want to just kind of draw that in, Arnon. In the middle is Jabbok, J-A-B-B-O-K, Jabbok. And then up here near, it kind of feeds in from the side here and then down into the Jordan River, is Yarmouk, Y-A-R-M-U-K. So Yarmouk at the top, Jabbok right in the middle, and this was a huge mountain, but there is a valley right there that it kind of flows through, and then down here was Arnon. All right, let's get your apps ready. We're going to Kahoot it one more time. And this is locations on the map, so you got to put your maps away. That would be cheating if you had your map out. And Jen, can you flip that map around so nobody cheats off that map? Thank you. Good to have Jen move back to the area. All right, there's the Kahoot it number. The game pin is 139993. And some folks even are watching this, by video later or live, and you can actually do this as well. It's available all the time. But they might change. I'm not sure they changed the pin number. Yeah, they might. All right, here we go. Wow, 53 players. All right, first question, Brother Ben. All right, so this is locations on the map. So you'll see dots and a circle around it. On the following map, which city is circled? Okay, you see that right there? So it's a little bit below that midline right there. So we have Ashkelon, Caesarea, Joppa, or Netanya. You have 4 choices. Even if you're not doing the app, get your brain in gear. See how you do. Joppa was correct. Good job. All right, 37 out of the 50-some. Next one. All right, another circled. Which city is circled there at the top of the map? Joppa, Tyre, Sidon, or Caesarea? Look at those answers just flying in. 10 more seconds. Wow, we have 58 answers already. 5, 4, 60. 3, 2, 1. It is Tyre. Yay! Okay. Good job. All right, now which city on this map? See it up here at the top, so it's not way up here, but it is right there. Galilee, Joppa, Hazor, or Caesarea Philippi. 5 seconds. Ooh, 62 answers. The correct answer is Caesarea Philippi. All right. Hazor was actually a little bit further to the west. All right, what region is indicated? Mount Hermon, Jezreel, Gilead, or Bashan? So this is the circled region. Right here is a dot. See that? All right, 5 seconds. 3, 2, 1. We have 62 answers. It is Bashan. It's a new area that we kind of talked about a lot in the Old Testament. It's where that tall king of Og lived. And then I figured out how to put pins in here. Isn't that cool? Oh. So that pin is at Hazor, Tyre, Dan, or Golan. These are kind of close together. Don't feel too bad if you get this wrong, okay? It is the city of Dan. Good job. And I think, is this the last one? No, 2 more. Which ancient city kingdom is marked by the green pin? Ancient city kingdom marked by the green pin. Megiddo, Ashkelon, Tyre, or Hazor? All right, 5 seconds. 3, 2, 1. It was Hazor. That's the one that got burnt. Good, 49 out of 62. That's great. Okay. Which river feeds into Jordan in the middle? All right, I just taught you that, so you might not remember that one. But Arnon, Yarmouk, Jabbok, Zerid. Take a guess. Arnon's at the bottom, so I'll give you that clue. Oh, too late. Yeah, Jabbok is in the middle, and Yarmouk at the top. And R.Y., is that Rudy Eckhout? Yoo-hoo! He's going to Israel. He's studying. He wants to be prepared. Scott Sterling, Brittany, is that you? Or Chris, did you use that name? No, that must be Brittany. Okay, Studio C, trying to get in there. Alyssa Hall, good job. Okay, I think Ben, did he give you the answers to study from? All right, I hope you enjoyed that, learned something today. Like I said, next week we'll study Galilee area. You are dismissed.